a lot of VITA followers, and here are technicians. I'm a technician myself. I was a technician for about 10 years before I became a dentist. So if we look at who I am a dental technician first. About 20 years ago, I graduated from the Los Angeles City College, 2-year dental technology program, and then I worked in a dental laboratory for about a decade while I got my biochemistry degree from Cal State University. Then Harvard made a mistake and they allowed me to go in and become a dentist at the Harvard School of Dental Medicine. And by then, because I didn't want to go back to work, I decided to keep going and I became a prosthodontist. I went to Chicago, I did a 3-year residency, I became a prosthodontist. At that point, I was having kids already, and me and my wife decided to come back to Boston, and we did 2 things. We have a practice now, the Lead Dental Aesthetics and Implants Center, where I work just like you guys do in your practice. And then we have the Dental Lead Academy, which many of you already know. We have online content, we have online courses, we have live courses, hands-on courses, we have the Instagram account and everything else. But I never like to see myself like that the one that you see on the screen, this little list of, graduations and things that I did in my profession. I like to see myself as a thinker and as a questioner. And because I question everything and I think about it. I question the status quo of everything, politics, sociology, psychology, dentistry. And then I ask questions, and I ask all the questions that I can, and I try to figure it out in my head, and I try to research. And then as an educator, I like to simplify things. This is something that I was told after I became an educator that I am good at. It's something that I never thought I was good at. I'm really horrible at many things, and I'm pretty good at many others, and I always thought that I knew my weaknesses and my strengths. But I guess some people say that I can simplify things in ways that people will understand it. So today, in 45 minutes, I want to do that. Now, when you ask Miguel, why you do what you do? Well, because I want to improve dentistry, and I always think that there are 2 ways that we can improve dentistry. As a speaker, that I'm on the podium, traveling from conference to conferences and writing books and things like that. You can do it by trying to be the best at this procedure, this knowledge, this research, this treatment, and then you take pictures and videos and you show it, and people go like, wow. That's one way, and that will help a small amount of dentists that can actually do that based on where they practice, the technology they have, the skills they have, to maybe do their things much better. But that will be a small group of people that can actually look at a presentation that is very high-end, complex, amazing treatment, and then be able to apply it. Then you have everybody else, the rest, the 95% of dentists that come after that maybe don't have the means, don't have the skills, don't have the time, don't have the situation around them to be able to do what somebody amazing shows. And I believe that instead of trying to get a few people to be amazing, if we can get 95% of dentists to be a tiny bit better, just a tiny bit, let's say 1% better, then that means that we're all going to improve dentistry a lot. Now, that's the plan for today. I want to see if some of you who are a little bit confused still about 3 of the 5 or 6 categories of dental materials that are out there, if you can get a clarification, a clear idea of what's out there and how to work with these materials. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on the hybrid materials. But let's talk about resins, let's talk about hybrids, let's talk about how to finish them, okay? Now, if you're a dentist, you're going to say, well, Miguel, why are you teaching me how to finish a restoration? Well, that's part of a bigger conversation about the advantages of finishing your own restorations in your clinic, be it because you have a milling unit or any other way that you can do it. There are many advantages. One of them is that you can finish the precision the same day, meaning on the tooth side, I can prep the tooth, I can do my bonding steps, and within 20 minutes, I can cement the final restoration or bond the final restoration. And add a hybrid layer prognosis of the restoration that is as ideal as it can be. Why? Because you never put a temporary on it. You never put 10 bond and a temporary and send the patient home chewing on it, and then you're coming back and either you did your bonding layer or you didn't, but now your collagen is all a mess, you're scraping the 10 bond or the temporary cement. from the restoration, then you're trying to bond to that. We have this idea in dentistry that when a restoration comes from the lab, the most important thing is when you put it on is, does it sit? Do the margin seals, are the contact okay? Is the color acceptable? And the reality is that if it sits, if the margins are okay, if the contacts are okay, and the color is acceptable, it's completely secondary in importance to how is that hybrid layer, that adhesive layer that is going to make this restoration last longer, since the number one problem that we're going to have with the restoration is no color breakage or contacts, but secondary decay. So doing restorations the same day and learning how to finish them allows you to do much better dentistry on the tooth side, right? We want this secondary decay to be happening way, way, way later than what is happening right now. So there are advantages of doing the things the same day. So let's see if we can simplify a little bit some of these materials. If I tell you, if I ask you, these materials that you see right here, can you tell me what they are and the differences among them and when to use them? Can you, if I say, explain to me each of those materials? What if I add more and more and more? It gets really confusing, right? So trying to memorize what each material is and trying to memorize what the indications are, what the pros and cons, the aesthetic characteristics and things like that, it's almost an impossible task. And every year the companies release more and more. Now, maybe a better way to do it is if we can categorize it. If we can realize that there's only 5 categories of materials, indirect materials, that we can choose from, then maybe it's easier. Why? Because under each category you can put all these materials and don't worry about all these numbers and all these letters and names. You will be able to understand that under each of these categories you're going to find materials that behave the same, that you need to treat them the same, that your options are the same. So if you understand the categories of materials, then any new product that you come across, the moment you can put it under a category, you will know how it behaves. Now, this is part of a 4-hour online course on dental materials that I have, which I explained this in detail at the Dentalic Academy, dentalic.com. And it's also part of a hands-on component that we have on my 2-day live courses where you come in and I teach you everything about dental materials, and you get to play with them, you get to stain and glaze and polish and modify them, you get to bond them. So today we're just going to be summarizing this, so don't expect this lecture to encompass 2 days in 45 minutes. But if we can categorize them, it's going to be much, much easier for you to understand when to use them, okay? So if we go in the category of resins, there are 3 resins that you can have. One of them is PMMA, the other one is composite, the other one is nanohybrid. Now, let's go through the 3 of them really quick for you to get an understanding of what these are. The first resin, the PMMA, is just this organic molecule, right? A bunch of carbons that come in monomers, small molecules like the A and B right there. And then when you give this molecule an initiation energy, such as the curing light, or you mix powder and liquid and it starts releasing heat, these molecules will have some double bonds that they will break, and then they will join forces and it will make a polymer. That PMMA, that in the clinic we use it as maybe GC alike, is one that most people know as pure PMMA, is the backbone of any composite that we use in clinic. Flowable, packable, cement, dentures, bases, and all of that. Everything, denture teeth, everything is made out of this backbone of organic material. Now, PMMA as itself is just clear. It's like plexiglass, the plastic thing that you see now in the stores when people don't want to get COVID contaminated. That's what PMMA is. We came and we used it in dentistry. We put some color on it and to give it the one it wanted to. Now, you know how this material behaves. It's kind of like a plastic, right? It will deform. You can put it in the oven or anything like that. It will burn, and it's soft in a way. So we decided at some point that maybe we wanted to improve it. So we got this PMMA matrix. That's what I want you to remember. This is the matrix, this organic matrix. And we added pieces of glass into it, and we call that the fillers. And when we added pieces of glass into this plasticky, acrylic-y matrix, we get composites. And these composites became better because the optics characteristics of a composite because of the pieces of glass, makes it prettier. It also improves some of the mechanical characteristics. We're not going to get too much into that, but from PMMA only to PMMA matrix with pieces of glass in it, it was a big improvement. And this is where all the composites that we have been having for maybe 70 or 80 years. Then in the last maybe 10 or 20 years, we started making those little pieces of glass inside this matrix much smaller. And we started calling it nano composites or nano ceramics. Why do we want the pieces of glass to be even tinier? Because you can pack more of them into it. And because you can improve the optical characteristics, you can improve the polishing characteristic, right? Because if everything is tiny, it will be much smoother. But at the end of the day, the PMMA composites, the composite itself, and the nano composites, they're all the same concept. The backbone of it, the matrix, is an organic polymer molecule. And then what we try to do is to put inorganic crystals, big pieces into the micros for the composites, and tiny pieces into the nano for the nano composites, to improve the way they look, to improve the way they behave. But they're kind of like a plastic. They behave like a plastic. You can repair it, you can modify it, you can't put them in the oven. Okay, so this is category number one. See, and these are the brands that you have from all of this. Now, on the hybrid category, we have something that is the opposite. Glass ceramic, the organic glass that we put into the composite as a big piece, is very porous, very, very porous. That's why glass ceramics, just feldspathic porcelain, just break so easily, because it's very porous. So about 15 to 20 years ago, Dr. Giordano at Harvard and many other researchers thought that if we can put resin inside those pores, if we can inject resin inside those pores, maybe we can do a couple things. Maybe we can get this brittle piece of glass to not be that brittle, to become a little bit more plastic, to change the model of elasticity. That's what we're talking about here. So it's not that brittle. And also, by putting resin into these pores, maybe we can stop crack propagation a little bit, because in ceramic, the crack goes from hole to hole, from hole to hole. And that's what they did. And then VITA acquired this technology, patented the technology, improved on the technology, and released to the market something that is called enamic, right? So VITA enamic is a glass ceramic. It's a piece of porcelain, very porous, that resin has been injected into it. So in a way, it's completely the opposite than any resin block, because resin blocks are a piece of composite with independent pieces of glass in it. But enamic is a big piece of glass, one piece of glass, that is being infiltrated with liquid resin. The way you should think about enamic, I think, is, you know, the sponge that you have in your kitchen to do your dishes, that blue or yellow sponge that you have? Well, that is your glass ceramics. It's full of pores. Now, when you put your detergent on it and start soaking into it, that will be the resin. So those two things together, after they cure the resin, are where enamic is. And this is what I want to concentrate on a little bit, maybe a lot, because a lot of people have a lot of confusion about enamic. They think it's a resin. No, it's not a resin, it's a glass ceramic. How do we know? Because 86% of it is glass. How does it break? It breaks like glass. How do you have to treat it in order to cement it? You have to treat it like a piece of glass. How does it look? It looks like glass after you polish it. So this idea that enamic is a resin is wrong. The only thing that enamic has in common with all the other resin blocks in the market is that you cannot put it in the oven, because it has some resin in it. If you put it in the oven, it's just going to burn and you're going to smell it, this plastic burning. And that's what confuses people. Oh, it has resin in it, so it's a resin block. No, it's not. But what enamic did is it allows to address one problem that we used to have. And we're going to talk about this case soon. One problem that we used to have, which is enamel is very stiff. Dentin is very soft. Enamel has a high modulus of elasticity. Dentin is more squishy. So when you try to bond something really hard to something really squishy, as you put pressure or forces on it, the squishiness is gonna move underneath, and it's going to put the tension on the bonding layer, and then it's going to de-cement, or the top is going to break. Now, if this sounds too confusing, think about a piece of glass. Like right now, the table that I have right here, it has a piece of glass on top of it, but it's on top of a piece of wood. So glass on wood, good. I can, do stuff, nothing breaks. However, if I get this piece of glass from this table and I put it on top of my mattress and then I stand on it, it's going to crack, right? Because something hard on something soft, the difference will create problems and things are going to break. So dynamic, when you have the modulus of elasticity, should be kind of like in the middle between what dentin is and what enamel is, because most other ceramics are as hard as enamel, and resins are very close to dentin. So dynamic went right in the middle, which allow bonding to be better and which allow this material to behave better on the masticatory forces. Now, what can you do with dynamic? Well, you can do something like this. This is a case that I like to show. I did this case about 10 years ago. Patient comes in, can you fix this tooth for me? I'm getting married tomorrow. Literally, this is the story. So I'm like, let me do something for you today. So that's the case. That's my preparation. And then I went in and I milled dynamic. Now, dynamic, I can mill it in about 5 to 10 minutes. And then I can either hand polish it or I can light cure glaze it, which I'm going to show you how to do. And that's what I did here on this one. I hand polish it, right? So this patient with 75 minutes left in a much better situation. Now, as you look at this, you're going to say, Miguel, that's kind of like an okay result. I agree, it's an okay result. It's monochromatic. I did it the same day. I didn't have to stain or anything, even though I could have. I just did it the first day the patient came. It's a final restoration because it's made out of ceramics. But then as I was doing this presentation, I'm like, man, I didn't think it looked that bad when I was in the mouth. And then I said, okay, look, incisal third, that's almost a perfect match. Middle third, that is also almost a perfect match, except for the fact that on the contralateral tooth, he has some composites there, and those composites lower the value and increase the chroma. So I would have two options here: either work on my restoration to make it look like that, or work on the tooth next to it to change the composites to make it look more monochromatic. And then you can argue if something needs to be done with the composites and things on the laterals, right? If I wanted to glaze dynamic, well, I can't put it in the oven. So what we can do is we can use the VITA accent kit. And with the VITA accent kit, you can do many things. The first thing you can do is glaze. So the glaze is a clear, I want you to think about the glaze as a clear composite liquid, right? So you can start glazing that. Now, this glazing kit, the accent light cure kit, is amazing, probably the best in the market. But you need to understand it's a resin. So if you're gonna bond resin to resin, you have to treat that resin. So what do you mean? I have this crown, and you're going to etch and put silane inside of that crown because that's how you're gonna deliver. Well, you're gonna deliver with a resin cement, right? That's why you etch and silane. Well, you gotta do the same with the outside if you're gonna do this. So you etch and silane the inside and the outside of the crown, and then the outside of the crown you can come and customize it. You can make a normal glaze where you get a little bit of a yellow tint, and you can put it on the on the gingival third, and then you can add a little bit to the mamelons, and maybe then you can get a little bit of blue, and with that blue you can do the incisal edge and the line angles. Now, why are we using yellow and blue? Well, yellow and blue are going to be one of the main things that you're going to use to characterize a restoration. Why? There are two things that these are made of. They're made of dentin and enamel. Wherever the enamel is thin on a tooth, you're going to see the dentin, right? Common sense. That dentin, as you know, is yellowish. Wherever the enamel is thick, you're not going to see too much dentin, and you're going to see enamel. And enamel tends to be translucent and tends to have opacity and fluorescent. So if you ever wonder how to mimic translucency or high chroma because of dentin, just think about that. Any tooth, where will the enamel be the thickest? Well, incisal edge, in between mamelons, sometimes on the line angles on the central. If you're on the posterior, the cast tip, the triangular ridges, all that where the enamel is thick, you want to give some translucency effect. And a little bit of blue will do that. Now, we never want to see blue. You got to put a slightly amount of blue where you think enamel will show light through, and that will give you the appearance of translucency. Obviously, you got to practice, but it's very easy to do. And whenever you want to have the areas where enamel is the thinnest, like the middle of the facial, the gingival third, or in the posterior, in the sulcus of the anatomy of the occlusal, that's where enamel is the thinnest and dentin is seen more. That's where you're going to use a little bit of yellow. Now, this is almost real time. Now, if you want to do a complex glaze after you complex glaze and stain, after you glazed it, after you put some yellowish, after you put some blue on the incisal, look how that restoration that was completely monochromatic is starting to look alive with 5 or 6 minutes of time. You can get a little bit of white and create some crease line if you want, but just to show it, you can now cure this, and this is something that you can deliver. And I could have done that, right? I could have done that in that case, so it's not monochromatic. It would have taken me 10 minutes with enamel. Now, we can do this with the posterior as well. You always start with a layer of glaze. Glaze is what's going to make it shiny, and you can stop after you just put the glaze if you want, right? You can have enamic blocks that come monochromatic, and you can have enamic blocks that have multicolor. So multicolor meaning you look at the block and it has a gradient, you know, from lighter to a little bit higher chroma. So it's really nice. That's what I use 99% of the time. I don't see the need to use a monochromatic block almost ever. But you can do the same. You can glaze, and then you can start putting a little bit of white maybe on the cast tips, because that's where the enamel is the thickest, and you're going to see on the posterior that the cast tips sometimes are a little bit wider. You can put a little bit of blue also around the cast tips on the triangular ridges. You can put a little bit of brown or yellow at the gingival third, and learn how to kind of blend it with the glaze layer underneath. And once you blend it with the glaze layer underneath, you start making this dégradé of color. All this is light cure. All this, if you don't like it, you have a little gauze next to you with a little bit of alcohol, or there's a thinner that also comes, a bottle, that you can just wipe it right off and start over. You do 20, 30 of this, and you're gonna become really good. And you can do this in the patient's mouth too. You put it in the mouth and you paint it in and take it out and glaze it. So these are how you can light cure, glaze enamic restorations. If you don't want to glaze it, because glaze sometimes does not stay long in the mouth, right? Because it's just like an outer shell. After chewing for a long time, it might start getting dull. You can hand polish it, and you can also modify the restoration. So in my online course, these videos are part of the online course. I teach you how to modify restorations, how to make it more pretty or more anatomy or less anatomy if you want. But this material, because it is a glass ceramics, it can be hand polished. And when you hand polish this material, that shine or the sheen that you will get to will almost never disappear. Right? Remember, this material cannot be put in the oven because it has resin inside. So we have two ways of finishing it. We can etch and silent the inside on the outside of the restorations, and then light cure glaze, which is easy, but it doesn't last as long. Eventually, after chewing and chewing, that glaze will go away because it's a resin, so it will wear off. Or you can hand polish it. Now, the trick to hand polish a restoration is that you have to use the one before the last step. In this case, in the VITA case, with the burrs that they provide, it is the pink stage, right? Because you have a pink stage and a gray stage. You have to spend about 90% of your time on the pink stage. You're gonna put some good pressure on it. You're gonna put some and polish it all. It's gonna be kind of shiny, but you shouldn't see any plane. When you look at the crown, you shouldn't see any scratch, because the last step, the shining step, the gray step, only makes things shiny like that. See, it's not going to remove any scratch. So people tend to jump to the last step too quickly when 90% of the time needs to be spent on the one that is not making it shiny, but the one that is making it smooth and soft. And then you can make it shiny. See that beautiful restoration you can do in about 10 minutes and ready to cement. So that's enamic. All the resins, you can do the same. You can light cure them the same way, and you can polish them the same way. But because they are resin, the polishing becomes tricky, because if you put too much pressure, you can burn, and it doesn't get as shiny as a piece of glass that like enamel. Then you have the glass ceramics, right? So glass ceramics are, we talked about it because they are the enamel without the resin. Now glass ceramics come in the regular feldspathic and lucite reinforced. Now don't get tricked here. They're not really reinforced. They're not stronger. Okay, this is just, you know, companies competing with each other, and Ivoclar saying, hey, this is reinforced. No, it's not. It's just a little bit different, but they both behave the same. Now, what do you need to know about it? Well, what you need to know about it is that it is a piece of glass. You see, they get glass from the real world and they make it into a powder, and then they're gonna get that powder and put it into the oven and cook it as a piece of glass. And as it comes out of the oven, you're gonna see they're gonna quench it into water, and then when they quench it into water, then they're gonna like mill it again into another powder, and they're gonna do things here. The manufacturing process for glass ceramic is different in every company. However, the final result of what a glass ceramic is, a feldspathic crown, a Mark II or an Empress, is glass. So as you know how the plastics that we just talked about behave, you also know how the glass behave. What are the good things about glass? They're beautiful. Glass is beautiful. We can stack porcelain on it. We can make intricate things to come from the inside, so it looks beautiful. They're translucent, they're fluorescent, they don't wear as much, they don't change shape over time as much as the composite because of wear. But they are very porous. And what you need to know about glasses is they're translucent, they're beautiful, and they're brittle, right? So knowing how to prep and how to bond will allow you to get these restorations anywhere in the mouth. Yes, the indication is you can use it anywhere in the mouth. No, Miguel, but it's a piece of glass. We need something stronger, like zirconia and lithium silicate in the posterior. No, you don't. If you know how to prep and how to bond, all the materials, all the categories are indicated for every single tooth in the mouth. I know that sounds shocking to some people, but if you're having problem that teeth are breaking and then you change the material and it doesn't break, it's because you're using the first material wrong. Because all of these materials are successful if you know how to prep, if you know how to bond. Bonding these materials to the tooth is what makes them stronger, okay? Not the material itself. So glass ceramics, we have Mark II and Trilux Forte in the feldspathic category, Empress Cat, GC Initial, okay? Now here's a case that I wanted to show, you know, how you can use a glass ceramic in the posterior. And this is VITA Mark II, and it works, you know, beautiful right there, delivered a first upper molar, okay? Now, when you have a glass ceramic that it doesn't have any resin in it, now you have also two options of how to make it pretty. You can hand polish it, just like I showed you that you can hand polish enamel, and I do that a lot. For most of my anterior restorations, I finish 99% of my restorations in my office myself. For most of the anteriors, veneers and things that I do, I will hand polish it. Some of them, if I need to stain them, not if I need to glaze them. If I need to stain it, if I feel like what I got out of the mill color-wise is not good enough and I need to add something, then I will do this, which is glaze and stain. It is very similar to what we did with the light curing, but this glaze goes in the oven. So the way you look about this accent kit by VITA, we had the accent light cure, the one that I showed you before, and this is the accent kit from VITA. This one, think about it as a liquid glass. We're putting liquid glass and liquid color on it. This has to go in the oven, you know, 800 degrees for about 20 minutes, and then it comes out nice and pretty. How do we do this? We do it the same way. We're gonna first use a layer of glaze, and then we're gonna start adding whatever we want to add. Do we want to accentuate the central groove with some, you know, dark stain? We can do that. Do we want to add a little bit of bluish around the cast steps to show some translucency? We can do that. And then you will put this in the oven, and then when it comes out beautiful. This is what the laboratory does when you receive your crown. But it's very peaceful and easy to do. When the patient is on the chair, you're sitting there, you're doing it, you go through your hygiene checks, come back, deliver the restoration. You can hand polish it, right? That's the other thing that we can do. We can hand polish these restorations where I use a 3-step system, even though VITA gives you on their burrs a 2-step system. I added a blue a step before that is a little bit thicker on the grid to remove, especially where the sprue was and things like that. And then I'm going to spend a lot of time on my pink wheel, the middle step, a lot of time. I put some pressure on it. I go in. One of the disadvantages of polishing versus glazing is that if you want a lot of surface texture or surface characteristic, you might polish it away. But with glazing, you can do all the texture, surface characteristic, little scratch, little lines here and there. And as you glaze it, if your glaze is thin, you put it in the oven, comes out, and all is there. So there's a negative of sometimes polishing restorations is you might remove some of the characteristics that you have. But as you can see, you can hand polish this to an amazing shine that is ready to be delivered. However, you can't stain it like that. So by polishing, I'm not going to be able to add high chroma on the gingival tear or translucency on the inside edge. It becomes more monochromatic, right? But as you can see, nice and polished. Lithium silicates, we have 2 categories of lithium silicates, right? So we talk about resins, hybrids, glass ceramics, and lithium silicates. And lithium silicates, we have the lithium disilicate, which is the EMAX that we all know for over 20 years, a material that basically revolutionized the industry. It's the one that allowed the industry to move forward on believing that non-metal containing restorations were something that we could do. Also the advances on cement and adhesive system that makes the restoration stronger ones that is adhesively luted. We can have Emax, GC, Amber, Tessera. These are all lithium disilicates from these leads, and I don't get too much into this in this presentation. I go through all the literature of all these materials and comparing them and the science behind it on the online course. But here is short of why from these 4, Emax is the best and the other one should more or less be ignored. Trust me, if you take the course, you're going to see all the literature. The company has from Europe has released a lithium disilicate that is interested on the shade side, because if you use Emax, you know that you have your shades A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, but you also have high translucency, medium translucency, low translucency, and medium opaque, right? So if you want to store this in your office or the laboratory, there's so many options. When in reality, companies always knew that translucency it's just a matter of which temperature you choose to sinter, to bake this restoration. And the company said, listen, I don't want to oversell you this. I'm not going to sell all these different translucency kinds of blocks. I'm just going to tell you what temperature you put in the oven, and then you can achieve the translucency that you want. So I think that was pretty cool. And Tessera for the supply Serrano was just released, coming out of their big, humongous failure of Celtra Duo, which they had to remove from the market. So if you're still using Celtra Duo, you should be considering not to. And they released Tessera, which they also claim that is better than anything before. But there is no science on Tessera yet. As you can see, you can go to PubMed. So stay away from Tessera for now and stick to what we know. Are all lithium materials, are all these different brands of lithium silicate the same? No, when you look under the microscope, each of them is crystal-wise a little bit different. But as a group, as the group of the lithium silicate, they're so close to each other on the characteristic when you compare them with a resin or a hybrid or a glass ceramic that we can bunch them all together, just like we do with the glass ceramic, and say, hey, this is how they behave. How do they behave? They're much more resilient than glass ceramics, because the way the crystals grow on a lithium silicate is different than the way the amorphous crystal of a glass ceramic is. And I'm going to show you some micrographs at the end. But basically what happens when you put a lithium silicate in the oven, this needle-shaped like crystal starts growing, and they crisscross each other like this, and it creates like a backbone skeleton that allows crack propagation not to propagate as much, making this material quote-unquote stronger for you. So that was the magic of lithium silicates, to change in the way the crystal structure was, even though it's a glass ceramic, to make it more resilient, more tough. So you can see them here, all the different brands. You can see all these little needles that the material has that allows them to be the material of choice for most clinicians, right? Lithium silicates. But it's also a glass ceramic, so you can stain it just like we stain the glass ceramics. You can, but it's really hard to polish. So glass lithium disilicate is really hard to polish. And now we can only mostly finish it in the oven, right? So we can have here an example of a case I did like a decade ago. We can discuss two preparation another point, but you know, the classic Emax that you pre-sinter, you try it in, and then you deliver it, okay? Now there's another category of lithium silicates that came out more or less after the Emax patents started coming down by other companies, which are the zirconia reinforced lithium silicate. Now every time you hear the words reinforced, don't believe it, right? It is a marketing idea that some people use to make you feel like, oh, this is stronger or more resilient. Emax has zirconia, 5% zirconia by volume or something like that. Emax, yeah, has zirconia in it. It's just that when they released it 20 years ago, zirconia wasn't a big deal. So they didn't even think about saying, hey, look, we have zirconia in here. They just wanted to tell you, hey, this is a lithium disilicate and it's great. Now new companies are saying zirconia reinforced lithium silicate, not disilicate. So it doesn't really change much what it does to the material. But there are a couple materials such as the VITA Suprinity, which are really good. So on the lithium silicate category, I want you to remember two of them, Emax and Suprinity by VITA. Those are the two main great materials by the science that has been published on them and how long they've been in the market and how well do they mill and how good are for your burrs and how good are they aesthetically and all of these things, okay? Here's a little case that I did at some point. I don't think I have the after picture, but you get the idea. This was the distal lingual cast that it was broken, right? This is how we pay our bills as dentists. This is a classic example of what comes in. And I needed to mill this little thing. And that's a VITA Suprinity that I chose there. Now, you see how it is like amber color? Well, you're gonna have to put this in the oven to bake, and you're gonna have to glaze it and stain it before. So staining is a little bit different because you're staining something that is transparent. You're not seeing the final color, but it's easy to learn. Here's another case, an ugly cross-bite tooth that I only replaced the buccal cast right there. See, another VITA Suprinity. This has been in the mouse by now for like 8 years, and it's for like 6-7 years. I don't remember, but it's doing well. But you see what I'm saying? When you want to stain this or glaze, you will be doing so with the restoration not in its final color, so it doesn't look like an A2 yet or like an A1. No, it's looking this amber transparent color that the material comes in before you put it in the oven. It's pre-sinter, so it's a little bit cooked but not fully cooked. Same as the purple from Emax, a little bit cooked but not final cooked. So you're either going to be staining and glazing on purple or staining and glazing on an amber color, like the VITA Suprinity that you see there. Is it hard? No, not really. You do 5, 6, 10 of this, and you're gonna really quickly realize when you put too much blue, when you put too little blue, and you adjust every time. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so you put it in the oven, comes out pretty. Okay, and then we have zirconia. Zirconia, I'm not gonna spend too much time because we're already 12:40. I'm gonna go really quick on zirconia, and then I prefer to do Q&A on materials that we talked about. Zirconia is a different beast. Zirconia comes on a powder. That powder gets pressed into a puck or into a block, and then we mill it. And when you mill it, it's like you're milling chalk. And when you mill, you have to mill it about 22% bigger, the restoration that it actually is, because when you put it in the oven at a much higher temperature and for a much longer time than the glass ceramics that we spoke about, it's going to shrink about 22% volumetrically. So imagine how much time it took the industry to understand the shape that something needed to be milled so that when you put it in the oven, it perfectly shrinks to something that then you can fit on the model in the mouth. Amazing technology. You can stain zirconia before you put it in the oven. So you do this like infiltration. You see, it has this piece of chalk crown next to my finger right there is after it came out of the oven, but it's big. You see how big that is? And then you have these liquids that we kind of let them soak into the material to give like translucency and chroma and things like that. And then when you put it in the oven, now you put it in and you have these effects coming from within. But let's say you put it in the oven and then you still want to stain and glaze, you can do it. You can do the same as you did before. You have the crown finish, but you want to put more glaze or more stain, you do it, you put it in the oven, bake it again, and now the outside will change color. So that's how zirconia works. These are the ones that we have in the market. So resins, they're a piece of plastic. They wear the modulus of elasticity is closer to dentin. You can patch them up. You can if you break, you can add composite to it. You can polish them, or you can light cure, glaze them, and stain them, but you can't put them in the oven. And the backbone is an acrylic, okay, backbone with pieces of glass in it. You can use them anywhere in the mouth if you want. Hybrids, there's only one in the market. It's a piece of glass that resin was infiltrated inside of it. So what it did is it brought the module of elasticity from being a material that is very stiff to something that will work nicely on top of dentin. So now when you have a preparation that you have enamel and dentin, you bond this and it will behave better, especially on the forces that go to the bonding layer, that as they tend to receive stresses when there is a mismatch, you get debonding and secondary decay and leakage. Then you have glass ceramics, which are just a piece of glass, very amorphous, very porous, beautiful, but brittle. And then you have lithium silicates, which are not as beautiful as glass ceramics, but very close, but they're a little bit more tough, right? The tenacity of it is higher because of those crystals that grow. You need to put them in the oven. They're really hard to hand polish, not impossible, but really hard. So you actually have to glaze them and stain them. Since you're gonna put them in the oven, might as well do it anyways. And then you have zirconia, a material that is completely different from many others. The adhesion part of it is a little bit less than the glass ceramics, although some studies are coming out saying that how it bonds to adhesive systems and resin cement is as good as other glass ceramics, which is interesting. But I have one big negative thing about zirconia. Many people use zirconia because many labs started selling cheap zirconia, you know, like $50 a crown and things like that, $99 from Glywell, and you know, the hammer test and things like that. Many people move into zirconia because the other categories were breaking on them. And the reality is that the other categories are breaking on you because you're not prepping and bonding correctly. That is a scientifically true fact that in the actually online course, I go through all the literature and I'll show it to you. But one of the biggest negatives of zirconia is you can't see through an X-ray. You can't see zirconia through an X-ray. Every other material I can see underneath. I can see if there's a bubble. I can see if the cement is washing off. I can see if decay is starting because you can see through it. Zirconia, we're back to PFM, that you only see secondary decay once it spills over. So I think that the non-benefits of using zirconia are not matching against the negatives of using zirconia, which is you can't see through an X-ray and you can bond as well, some studies show. So I wanted to show you now how they look under the microscope, right? So look on your left, resin. You see it's a matrix of ceramic with all these pieces of glass, right? You see these pieces of glass. Now enamic on the other side, I'm gonna go forward. Enamic is a glass ceramic. You see the glass ceramics, how porous they are? Well, enamic is when we fill those pores with resin. Okay, so crack propagation has to go through resin now, not just through a bubble. And also the modulus of elasticity is closer to dentin, so it behaves better on top of dentin. Lithium silicate, you see these crisscross crystals that what they do is they make the material tougher. And then zirconia is a different beast in a different category that is very tough, but you can see through X-ray. So now that retention and resistant forming dentistry is no longer needed, and that's part of another lecture that I need. One of the benefits of doing same-day dentistry and learning to polish and learning the materials and learning to stain and glaze is that the preparations are easier, that you never had to provisionalize, you maintain your hybrid layer. These are all the arguments against doing the restorations in-house, and that's why you learning to finish them. And you get full control of shape, color, and function. Like I don't ever have to send a case back to the lab. I never have to say the color is not good. I can go and put it in the mouth and then stain it a little bit, put it in the oven, put it in the mouth again. I can add a contact. I can, I can modify them. If I get a restoration that is finished and I think I need to modify it, I'm not freaking out that now it's not going to be shiny anymore. No, I know how to finish it, and respecting the patient's time, right? We can do better dentistry in fewer appointments. I think respecting the idea that patients have a life and work and kids, and no, they don't want to come back, they don't want to go home with a stinky temporary in their mouth, are arguments for same-day dentistry and dentists trying to understand materials and how to finish it better. So in that idea that if I can get the average dentist to be just 1% better by understanding materials, the categories, and what the options are, is why we did this presentation. Thank you very much. Jaden, you can take it over. I'm going to open it up for questions. We have about 15 minutes of questions, and I hope that was helpful.
Great lecture. Very entertaining and very, very thought-provoking. I feel like I even learned a lot as someone who doesn't do this work. So excellent.
Thank you, Jaden.
Now, couple more things that wanted to remind you all of. For CE credits, you'll receive an email that will direct you to your CE credits. I'm in charge of creating and sending those out to you all, so you should expect those by tomorrow. For additional VITA learning and extra webinars that you could watch on demand, please feel free to check out our YouTube at VITA North America. We also have some very engaging and interesting content all on our social media platforms, which are also listed here. If you are interested in getting in contact with one of our sales representatives, here is a list of all of those here. If you wanted to get in contact with our help desk, the numbers for each country, US and Canada, are to the right along with the email. A couple of VITA Academy webinars that are coming up for the rest of the month. We have one on December 12th. That will be with Mark Wagensill. He'll be giving a great lecture on dentures. And on the 21st, our last webinar of the year, will be with Felix Pages, and he will be going over the do's and don'ts of zirconia. So if you are interested in signing up for those, you can go to www.vitanorthamerica.com/courses to take a look at the rest of our courses for the year. We also have a 2024 VITA Germany hands-on workshop coming up very soon. Next year, of course, it'll be in May and June. We have 2 dates that you are able to choose from, where you will be able to go to Germany and visit our factory, the headquarters, and just kind of get a real look into what we do here at VITA. So if you are interested, please reach out to us and we can get you some information on that. And then, of course, our technical support hotline is here. US and Canada lines are there, but if you wanted to reach out to Paul Richardson or Jim McGuire themselves, their numbers are listed here. All right, so now it is time for questions. I will go here to see if we have any. So far, not a question, but someone just said, thank you so much, an amazing presentation.
Thank you, appreciate it. Anybody has any questions? I'm free for anything. If not, I'm gonna go play with my kids.
Any questions? Last chance for questions here.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. I hope to see you next year. We'll do a couple more webinars. And if you come up with a question in your head later, you know where to find me in social media. Send me a message to Instagram and I'll answer it. Okay, if you're in your clinic and something went wrong, just send me a picture. Say, hey, Miguel, what do you think about this? And if I have an answer, I'll give it to you. Jaden, thank you very much for your time.
No problem. Thank you all for joining us today for another VITA Academy webinar, and hope you have a good one.